Hi, everybody, and welcome back to my podcast, A Catholic's Perspective, the podcast all about being a young Catholic surviving in a secular world. Today, I have a special guest with me. I have Judson Carroll. He is known as the Master Herbalist, and I know tons and tons of you guys have been asking me to post holistic content and medicinal content, but because that's not really a part of my ministry per se, it's more a part of my personal life, I thought I would bring on an expert. So, welcome, Judson. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Steve Cunningham, the one who does Census Fidelium. He's the one who actually introduced me to your stuff.
Yeah, he's a
And I
great
was
guy.
just like, oh, this is so cool. Like, yeah, because he's getting really into that stuff too. We talked about it a bit in the podcast. I think that's actually coming out next week. But I'm really excited to have you on because this is something I'm very passionate about, and I know my listeners are passionate about as well.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm always glad to share. This is, um, it's funny. Life kind of comes full circle. I started my herbal apprenticeship when I was 15,
Oh wow.
and did not start writing books until basically when COVID started, and I had to figure out what I was going to do at home. And as of next week, I will have published my 15th book. So
That's
I've
amazing.
always got a lot to say on the subject.
Yeah, no, I saw some of your books, like I think something we were talking a little off the cuff about some books my listeners might be interested in, like Christian's History of Herbal Medicine, and then also the Encyclopedia of Bitter Medicinal Herbs, which was personally something that interested me because you know what they say, it's what is it? Bitter to the tongue is sweet to the liver, sweet to the tongue is bitter to the liver, or something like that. That's why dandelion leaves are really good for your liver and things like that. But yeah, wow, 15 books. That is crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I tend to. When I get into something, I get really into it. I worked as a musician for several years. I ended up playing like 12 different instruments and singing and
Wow.
performing in like, I don't even know, five or six different genres. I worked in politics in DC for a while. Um, when I get into something, I get really into it. So when I'm ready to write a book, I'll give everybody the secret. If you want to be an author and you want to write a lot of books, okay, write this down. This is the best piece of advice I ever got. Write 2 pages a day. That's
Oh,
it.
wow.
2 pages a day every day. At the end of the year, you've got 700, almost 800 pages. You've probably written two or three books. Just go through and throw out the bad stuff, put them in the book, and you're good to go.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that helps making it more simplified. Too many people overcomplicate things, and it's like it doesn't have to be that crazy. It's like just two
Yeah,
pages a day, guys. Come on.
yeah.
No,
And that's my whole philosophy. When I talk about herbs, I'm what I call a kitchen herbalist. I'm not a clinical herbalist. I don't diagnose people and put together all these. Like I studied traditional Chinese medicine for about 10 years. I do not do traditional Chinese medicine formulas because they are far too complicated.
fair.
I use really the Germanic, the German folk medicine style is much more to my liking, and the Appalachian herbs that I grew up on is sort of a mix of Scots Irish and English and Cherokee and Catawba Indian, and we're teas and tincture people, kind of shotgun formulas, and I keep it really simple for everybody. Father Nape was a great German herbalist. He was a priest, and he wrote a book called My Water Cure. He was big on bathing in cold water. You may have seen this has been kind of trendy again, right? Well, he
Yeah.
actually cured his tuberculosis with a combination of cold water baths and herbs. And after that, he wrote this wonderful book, and it became actually the best selling book in the world next to the Bible. It was
Wow.
probably the first book ever counterfeited, actually, to put out fake copies of it.
Wow.
But his whole system of herbal medicine, he said he wanted men to learn to grow herbs in the garden. He wanted women to learn to identify herbs in the wild, men and women both. But really, the mother was supposed to handle the kitchen apothecary, like a little
Mhm.
cabinet of drawers where she keep all the herbs for the tea. But the main thing was to get the kids out there and teach them to identify the plants. And he did not believe in pharmaceuticals very much because they didn't help his tuberculosis. Of course, this is 1890s. You got to take that with a
Right.
grain of salt. But it was to be family medicine practiced at home. And I guess 30, 40 years, yeah, about 40 years after Father Nate came Father Johann Kunzel, Swiss herbalist. and he was actually practicing the same style of German folk medicine. And it was sort of the beginning of when the Nazis were taking over, and they were really starting to like regulate medicine and such. He actually went to court and proved that his herbs helped with diabetes more than the doctor's drugs,
Huh.
making German herbal medicine, German folk medicine is what's called, basically the only legal form of home medicine in Western Europe when at the same time America was outlawing herbal medicine through the Pure
It's
Foods and
so
Drugs Act of
crazy.
1960. So our intact tradition that goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks and really the ancient Jews. In fact, there's Jewish legends that say the Archangel Raphael taught herbal medicine to Moses, right? Not Moses, I'm sorry, Noah. That makes more sense. Taught it to
I was about to
Noah.
say,
Yeah, well,
close
whatever.
enough.
One of those guys back there. But our intact, what kept it together is the Catholic tradition of herbal medicine. The
Mm,
first herbal medicine book written well, in the Christian era, post pagan era, was by Abbot Walafrid Strabo. And he
oh,
was the tutor to Charlemagne's grandkids and one of the first, major writers in Catholicism. Wrote a whole
wow.
book in poetry with a great sense of humor on how to use herbs and also keep a little kitchen garden because he liked his um, he was an eater.
Wow, that's amazing. I think I was raised by a very holistic mother who made her own tinctures and ointments and everything. And every single time I was a teenager and I was just like, Mom, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm just going to go get some Tylenol for my flu symptoms, whatever. Never worked as well as what my mom gave me, which was usually garlic, onions, oregano, basic things that are so common in households today that you would never think have medicinal properties. And yet, every
Oh
time
yeah.
I'd go get Tylenol, I'd end up sicker than I was before, or it just covered my symptoms. And that's not to be like promoting it as in, like, oh, yes, I'm a herbalist. I sell all these things. So buy from me. No, for real, I would be a teenager. I'd go to CVS and be like, I'm gonna go get Tylenol or whatever, and Mucinex, whatever. And then I would take it. I'd feel worse. I would feel
Yeah.
like, oh, there would be like minimal help in maybe drying something up, but then it would either come back, it would be worse, it covered the symptoms. There was relief for a little while, but then it came back stronger. But if I did steaming with an onion, if I made, if I ate a clove of garlic, if I took oregano oil, stuff like that, that actually worked. Now, don't take all of
Mhm.
those things on an empty stomach like my husband did the
Yeah.
other day, but but they do
Especially
work.
oregano oil.
Ugh, yeah, that's a strong one. Maybe don't take oregano and garlic at the exact same time either.
Yeah. Well, and also, if you really want to get the full benefits of the garlic, crush it and let it sit in the air for a little bit. Let it oxidize a little bit,
Oh,
and it's really interesting. Like some types of garlic that'll mellow it out a little bit. Some it actually makes it stronger. So
interesting.
yeah, you got soft neck garlic and hard neck garlic, and you got the big elephant garlic. They tend to be the most mild. But yeah, so like the Ashkenazi Jews, which they were in the area sort of around Ukraine and Poland and parts of Germany going up the river.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
their like central part to their herbal medicine is garlic and onions. They credit garlic and onions with their survival, honestly. But
Wow.
greatest herbalist of all time, Saint Hildegard von Bingen. She said she was taught herbal medicine by the voice of the living light. And later writers tried to say that, she was just using Greek medicine. I mean, I've got all the works, Dioscorides, Pliny the Elder, Hippocrates. No, her medicine was totally different,
Wow.
totally different. And I do believe like she was probably given like the wisdom of Solomon. And so, yeah, people try to say like, herbal medicine is all like witchy and woohoo. You know, it wasn't for me. I was taught by, the Hicks family of Beech Mountain, North Carolina, down a 10-mile dirt road, living in a cabin with only one electric light bulb and no running water, a wood stove,
Oh,
300-year-old cabin. They made their living as herbalists and gathering herbs to sell them. After that, I went and studied different things. And then coming back to the whole German tradition of folk medicine, I find
wow.
it's very Catholic. And I mean, and so much great Catholic herbalists in pre-Reformation England. John
Mhm.
Parkinson was the king's herbalist. He was so good that he was one of the few Catholics allowed to remain in service to the king
Oh,
without renouncing Catholicism. He was
that's
that
crazy.
essential. Yeah,
Huh. Essential worker 101.
yeah,
That's insane. I mean, also just to think, I love Saint Hildebrand. She's phenomenal. I've read some of her recipes. My mom had a book from when I was really small, and I was reading it, and I'm like, what? How does this taste good? But then you realize medicine back then, it's not like what it is today, where they used to try to cover it up with sugars and
yeah.
circulose and all of that stuff. It's like people didn't like taking medicine for a reason. It sucked, kind of. Some of it did. Teas were a nicer way to receive medicinal, benefits.
Sometimes,
But a lot of the
sometimes,
times I had some tea recently that really, really helped my lung problems when I was sick, mullein tea.
yeah,
And, I would steep it for 24 hours and then I would drain it and drink it. And almost instantly, the mucus dried up in my lungs and like I didn't have any issue. And then, of course, you get that thing where your lungs get a little too dry. So you just add a little
yes.
marshmallow root to it and it like fixes the entire problem. And I was just sitting there on the edge of my bed and my husband was like, "What?" And I was like, this was literally less than like $2 for me to make. And it cured me basically. And everyone's a little different, I guess, but to have these things at our fingertips and yet to be so afraid of them. I mean, dandelions are everywhere.
Mhm.
Certain weeds are everywhere. Creeping Charlie is a part of the mint family, and people used
Yeah,
to use that for things. Like now, all these weeds, they're killing them. None of them were well, some of them were. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I'm not an expert or anything, but most of them were brought over from other countries, like
yeah,
immigrants brought them over. It wasn't
yeah.
native to this area, correct?
Yeah, most of them, yeah, what we call weeds now were brought over as food and medicine. But one thing you said, the reason I laughed, um, one of the things that actually got me into herbal medicine. See, I inherited really bad asthma. Flared up when I was about 5. I was like in and out of hospitals when I was a kid. And when I was probably about 14, now some of your listeners may know where Boone, North Carolina is. This is like the center, Boone and Asheville, like the center of hippie culture west, I mean, east of the Mississippi. Okay. This is, I mean, grew up a total deadhead. I used to have hair down in my butt. I was just one of these local kids hanging around. And, one winter, I guess it was, got a bad chest cold. And I mean, it was not getting better. Antibiotics were not helping. I mean, I was coughing up blood. It was getting really bad.
Wow.
And there was this weird, scruffy little dude named Joshua. He called himself the last of the Watauga Indians. Turned out he was a Jewish guy from up in New York that took a little too much acid, wigged out, and lived in the woods. But he was a really nice guy. And he comes running up to me one day. He kind of scurries up. He says, "You got to smoke the furry thing, man." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I'll be right back." So he goes out to his tent in the woods and brings me back dried mullein. And
Ooh.
he's like, "I learned this from this, medicine man and, wherever. Smoke the furry thing, man." And I'm like, "Hey, man, I'll give it a shot." And I did, and it brought up all that crud, right?
Yep.
And it cured me like in the blink of an eye. And that
Yep.
was one of the main things that got me interested in herbal medicine. And when it
Mullein is
comes to things
fantastic.
not tasting good, St. Hildegard loved bitters. She
Mm.
was totally into wormwood. In fact, like if you ever had a real martini, just made with vermouth,
Yes.
that's actually German for wormwood wine. And she was probably one of the ones that invented that.
Oh. Oh, that's so cool. I had
Yeah,
no idea.
I know.
Are in alcohol, is that where bitters come from? Like when they add bitters to alcohol, is that what it
Well,
is? Was it
you could
supposed to be
make
medicinal?
a tea bitters, obviously, but yeah, if you make an alcohol tincture, an alcohol extraction of any bitter herbs, it could be dandelion, as you mentioned. It could be sage, can be very bitter in some forms. But yeah, wormwood, mugwort, um, calamus is very often used. But yeah, the that vermouth is wormwood wine, and it was invented probably in her abbey, somewhere. Was it an abbey? I guess it, wherever the nuns are. Around 1080 AD. And of course, now we just think of it as a mixer for traditional martinis. And of
Yeah.
course, everybody now wants one of those sweet, like nasty things. And it's even
Yeah.
hard to even order a real martini anymore.
If you do, it's usually there. If you do try to order a real one, the bartender's usually looking at you like, "Are you good?"
Giving you the side eye. Yep. And also the gin. Gin was invented by the English. Actually, people have been infusing juniper in alcohol. I mean, Father Nate recommended that. St. Hildegard recommended that, right?
Okay.
But when the English started going into the colonies and such, they started encountering malaria and different viruses and such. And of course, they had a problem with scurvy because they weren't getting enough vitamin C on their ships. That's why they're called
Right.
limeys. They took limes with them. So they started coming up with these cocktails, right? Well, gin with juniper infused in it gives you vitamin C and it has antiviral properties. And then actually, the Jesuits discovered quinine, I
Mhm.
think in Panama, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Peru. It was in Peru. And they
Oh, so
found that if
gin
they
and
infused
tonic.
quinine, yeah,
Mm,
you just said it. They invented the gin and tonic. And that's
that's
why it's like
crazy.
the national drink of England.
So it was so basically the gin and tonic was meant to be a medical, basically, to
Yeah,
cure
prevents you from
scurvy.
getting malaria. Yeah.
And yeah. Wow. Isn't that so funny how things we order just normally every day, like my husband makes a gin and tonic probably 3 times a week, and he'll make me one sometimes and I'm like, "Oh, this is great." You're like, "Yum." And you don't realize that actually there are okay, I will say it does depend on the type of alcohol you get though, because
Mhm.
I do believe that the quality of alcohol does depend on the medicinal benefits you get. But if it's a good
Mhm.
quality alcohol, I think, the medicinal benefits are better. But some people go and get like, they're just like, oh, wine has medicinal benefits. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what kind of wine do you drink? Barefoot?
Yeah.
No, sweetie, that's sugar.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not it.
That's true. Yeah. But oh, yeah. There's so many. But I mean, you can go back to like the first cookbook we have in Western America, Apicius's Roman cookbook, and they have all these herbal infused wines, and a lot of them are very medicinal, but they're all very sweet with honey. You can tell the Roman palate was really toward the sweet side, and so
Right.
I've been kind of experimenting because I don't have much of a sweet tooth myself. I'm more of a savory kind of guy. And I've been kind of experimenting with some of those old Roman recipes, kind of backing off a little bit on the honey. I mean, they used fish sauce like you'd have in Thai cooking or something. And
Ew.
they call it garum, and it's like funky, kind of umami. You put it in there with some olives and mushrooms, and it's like, wow, this is not something I would have ever thought of. But
Is it good?
some of the recipes are really good. Ancient Roman food is actually more like Chinese food than it is Italian food.
That's
They
interesting.
use tons of spices, cloves, and black pepper, fish sauce. They had a sort of almost a soy sauce that they made.
Mm.
They used all kinds of just interesting herbs, bitter herbs to counter sweets. With a lot of Chinese food, they balance like the sweet, the savory, the umami, and
Yeah,
all that.
like orange
That was really the
chicken and,
concept. Yeah,
pad thai.
and
Yeah.
so yeah, it's a little sweet for my taste, but mess around with it, it's pretty darn good actually.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, now I want that
Yeah, I
too.
love this kind of stuff.
I'm like, I
Well,
don't know if I
yeah.
would try it, but if you haven't died yet, I guess it's okay, right?
Well, I'm actually like a third French, and I think that's like I get this like huge passion for cooking. That's actually how I got into herbal medicine. Like I said, after that guy told me about the mullein, um, one day my mom was out and she met this guy. He was working at a dump site, like where they receive garbage, right? And she goes talking to him. Turns out he's the grandson of this famous storyteller in the mountains of North Carolina, told the Jack tales, or these old folk tales. And she remembered that I had read a book, on the Jack Tales when I was a kid, and I loved them. It's like the
Mhm.
further adventures of Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk, basically. They're passed down orally for hundreds of years.
Right.
And she's like, "You got to meet this guy." And so we get to talking, and he's like, he asked me what I've been doing. I was like, "Oh, I was out gathering mushrooms because I love to harvest wild mushrooms." And he's like, "You forage?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You fish?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "We need to talk, son." Within like of a couple of weeks, it turns out he's also the nephew of the Hicks family that did the herbal medicine. And
Oh.
so here I was, 15, and I'm up there in the mountains with these old mountain people wandering around, learning to identify ginseng and mullein, learn to harvest mullein that was coming in season, and spikenard and golden seal and all these herbs that they would actually gather for a living. But it was food that paved the way because when I was a kid, my family owned a little gourmet imported grocery store, and we had all these like mushrooms and such.
Mhm.
And after that closed down in North Carolina, you couldn't find anything like that for the next 20 years, you know.
Wow.
So when I was like 13, I went to the library and got an Audubon field guide to identify mushrooms. And I just went out on my own and started picking wild mushrooms. And amazingly, I didn't die.
Especially with mushrooms. I mean, that's the one
Especially.
thing.
Yeah, I
You
could have
gotta be
picked
really
anything
careful.
else.
Some look so
Yeah.
much alike that are, like, poisonous and okay.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
what
Just the other day, I picked a bolete. I thought it was sort of maybe the same family as like a king bolete. It turned out to be a Louis Americanus. And
Oh,
I found out very quickly because if you touch it, you get contact dermatitis and your hands turn red. And it looked
awkward.
identical except for the stalk. And see, I had to pick it to see the stalk, you know? So I picked it, my hand just turned like beet red.
Oh, no. Are you okay now, though?
Oh, yeah, yeah, it didn't do any harm or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's it's interesting too because, like the stories you say, how like these moments just kind of brought you into herbalism and things. Were there any moments where you questioned it at all and were like, "Oh, is this actually real or not?" Like
Oh
what
yeah.
really solidified your interest in this that you decided
Okay.
to write books on it and everything?
Yeah. So like I said, when I did my herbal apprenticeship, um, I was studying traditional Chinese medicine, doing qigong and tai chi and all that stuff. You know, I was actually the youngest hatha yoga instructor in North Carolina. Um, I don't practice any of that anymore. But
Obvi,
uh,
but.
so when I was about 20 or so, I was working a job. I was unloading a truck, and a case of cast iron furniture fell on me. And I kind of caught it in midair and turned and sat it down. I'm actually kind of a big guy. I'm like 6'4" and 220 when I'm lean. And so I just caught this big case and I sat it down. In the process, let's see, fractured 3 vertebrae and blew out 2 discs and hit the ground and was paralyzed for the next 2 years.
Oh,
Yeah. And
damn,
nothing, I
okay.
mean, I'll tell you how this gets a good ending, but nothing helped. I mean, the herbs did not stop pain like that. I didn't have access, like, I couldn't make my own morphine or something. And the acupuncture and such, like, really didn't help. I'm like, quit sticking pins in me. That's enough. Okay, we're done with
We're
that.
good, thank you.
So, but it also turned out Western medicine couldn't help either. They said I would probably never walk again, and at least have a if I recovered, probably a 30 to 40% disability for life.
Wow.
Lowest time in my life, became kind of hooked on the pain medication to the point that I was taking so much of it, it was going to kill me. And I just stopped cold turkey. And then I went 10 days and nights without sleep and started seeing things. So that wasn't fun.
That'll
And
happen.
then amazingly, I'm stuck on the couch. I can't get up. And the TV, we didn't have a lot of channels back then. Pat Robertson comes on. I'm like, oh no, not Pat Robertson, please, anything but Pat. But I can't get up. And he says suddenly, I have a word of knowledge. The Holy Spirit just told me that there's a young man in the mountains of North Carolina who's paralyzed from a back injury. By the word of God, he is healed in this moment. And a spiral of heat went around my spine. And I was actually had born with scoliosis. My spine actually, where are my hands? They're over here. There we go. Straightened. And I
Oh.
grew over an inch in the blink of an eye and was able to walk again.
Oh, wow.
The pain did not go away. I still have pain, but my back was healed in the blink of an eye. The X-rays from one day to the next did not look like they were the same person.
Wow.
That led me to totally change my life. Ended up getting very into the Bible and went down to Georgia, worked as a youth minister in a Methodist church for a while. Um, then went up to Virginia and worked with Jerry Falwell, Dr. Falwell, in pro-life issues. That got me into politics.
Yeah.
While at Liberty University, I learned started reading the early church fathers and comparing it to the Bible and thought, oh my gosh, I've got to become Catholic. And then they asked me to leave Liberty University. And
Yeah, I went to
yeah,
U Liberty University for college online. I
really, wow, okay. So you know what
Yeah,
I'm talking about.
I do. Oh,
Um,
yes, I do.
when one person thought I was Catholic, suddenly everybody in the school knew I was Catholic. and
Mhm.
like they would start turning and running away from me and going the other direction. And finally, when the professor said, "We don't think you belong
Mhm.
here,"
Yes.
okay,
Exactly.
so, so anyway, I ended up working in politics around DC. Came back, had my own statewide newspaper for a while. I was working with guys like Rush Limbaugh and G. Gordon Liddy, and I was really flying high. And then I caught a couple of Republicans just being just as corrupt as Democrats and exposed
Mhm.
them and lost all my advertisers because, you can
Yeah.
get one side or the other, but when you, alienate both sides. And so I'm back in North Carolina and flat broke. 2008 recession's hit. I'm about to lose my house. Obamacare's passed. I can't afford health insurance. And I look around and I realize all I need is right out here. All the
Mm.
herbs I grew up learning about. And that's when I started getting into German folk medicine. And, there was a lady from Austria named Maria Treven who wrote some great books in the 1980s on German folk medicine. That's how I learned about Abbot Strabo and St. Hildegard von Bingen, Father Nate, Father Kunzel, Brother Aloysius. And I thought, wow, herbal medicine that's Catholic.
Yeah.
And since then, I haven't been to a doctor in 20 some years. Um, you know, um, I'm living the dream now.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too because growing up for me, being raised in a holistic household, I just thought everybody knew these things about
Yeah.
plants and stuff. So, little 4 or 5-year-old me had a book of herbs, and I would be able to match the plants and the weeds up to what I saw in real life and be able to bring them in for tea or whatever. And my mom would do the whole process of like bringing them in and like washing them and
Yeah.
then dehydrating them
Yeah.
because I was too little for all of that. But then it was so rewarding when I could drink the tea of like leaves from the raspberry bush that I picked, or before they flower, of course. Otherwise, bleh.
Well, it's
That's a little
pretty.
bitter.
Yeah. And for us, I mean, really, in my family, before I got like serious in herbals, we had tons of home remedies.
Hmm.
My great grand everybody in my family lives to be 100 or more. So I grew up with let's see, my great grandfather was born like 1880 or something, and
Wow.
he lived to be well over. So I got to know him. My great grandmother, I guess, was about 99. Great grandfather 96. So and we lived in a farm in eastern North Carolina that was going back like 200-300 years. So and my grandfather was actually a pioneer of permaculture. He actually started doing permaculture like before it even had a name. He had all these. Well, that's a whole different story. But his farm was incredible. But I mean, everything was like go outside and there's herbs and food and I mean, we had cows, pigs, chickens, goats. We had the whole bit. But we also had apple trees and peach trees and pear trees and all kinds of wild. Every time he found a new plant, he had to try to grow it. We had
That's
a
awesome.
little pond that had an alligator in it, and it
Okay.
was just
Why not?
well, yeah. There was this was actually my uncle doing. My uncle was an interesting guy too. He was an early rock and roll DJ. He was friends with James Brown and people like that.
That is so
But
funny.
one day he finds a three-legged alligator and he was like, "Yeah, I'll keep it as a pet." So it hung out in the pond and kept kept the goose population down. That's for sure.
That is so funny.
But yeah, we just had a lot of home remedies. I mean, if your allergies flared up, you get local honey. You'd use them.
Mhm.
If you had a sore throat, you'd have sage tea. We didn't, mint when you're starting to get a cold. We just didn't really think about such as that.
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
it
of
being
course.
different than other things. Yeah.
I also know for, my husband, he's always struggled with cystic acne. And there's never really been anything that's specifically helped him in his cystic acne. He's tried antibiotic creams,
Mhm.
oral antibiotics back when he was younger, and it was a lot worse. But when he's stressed, he tends to break out a lot more. And I just put on like a little bit of, so it's, the salves are kind of made with uh, an infusion of oil and herb and then beeswax. Like literally 3 ingredients. That's it. And it's plantain. And the plantain, and I mix it with oh my gosh, I can't think of it right now. You probably know it, but it's like it's known to heal so quickly that you're supposed to mix it with something else.
Like comfrey.
Comfrey, yes, thank you.
Nope.
And I do a mix of plantain and comfrey, clears it right up within like 2
Yeah.
days. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Oh, comfrey is so powerful. So like a couple of years ago, uh, like I said, kind of a big guy. A lot of times I pick up things too heavy for myself, right?
Uh-oh.
And you would think I would have learned my lesson.
Here we go again.
But yeah, I'm like carrying about 400 pounds. I stepped off the porch and missed a step. And my foot goes down, and let's see, where are my hands again? There we go. My knee dislocated sideways.
Oh,
I
no.
dropped
Oh.
everything. I got on the ground. I snapped my knee back into place and crawled into the house. And I mean, my knee swelled up about the size of a volleyball and was completely black. And
You.
I got some comfrey salve, started putting it on there. And it took a while and it hurt real bad. But I started taking this, putting that comfrey salve on there and taking a few anti inflammatory herbs and different things and taking comfrey internally. Now, some people say don't take comfrey internally. Here's the deal: if you have a family history of cancer, because comfrey promotes cell growth, it
Mm,
could potentially cause a tumor to grow.
I see.
So that's something people always ought to look out for. Our government says don't take comfrey internally whatsoever. I don't worry about it too much, but I don't have a family history, so I'm just saying that.
Right.
And I never give people medical advice. I'm not a doctor,
None of us
standard
are.
disclaimer. Yeah. So I start putting this on, and within 6 weeks, I'm pretty much walking normal again. Now, it took several months to heal, right? A friend of mine who's a beaver trapper was out trapping and did the exact same thing. He went down a ravine, blew his knee out.
Oh
He
my
goes in
gosh.
for the standard routine. They're draining fluid off. He's having, I don't know if he actually had surgery, but he was doing the um, uh, physical therapy and he's taken pharmaceuticals. 6 months pass and he's still on crutches.
Oh my
And I said, why don't you just try this comfrey salve? He's like, yeah, I might as well, I got to try it. About a month later, he's in the gym.
That's
Never went
crazy.
back to the doctor again. It's amazing stuff.
Isn't it very interesting how, also so many people make money off of us being sick? Like, I feel like that's such a common thing that goes around these days, but every single time I was, given a prescription or something by a doctor, not I never took it, but I would see what the prescription is for, like anti-inflammatory, this or that, and I'd be like, "I'm just gonna take some turmeric," like, "I'm just gonna take some
Yeah.
ginger," whatever. And I would have friends who were on the same thing, the prescription or whatever, and they would have to, like, up their dose. Their body would get used to it. They'd feel sicker, their side effects, etcetera. And I would be like, "Yeah, no, I'm good, thanks." Like, the only thing I take now, potentially, that's, like, harmful is, like, ibuprofen if,
Mhm.
like, nothing else is working and I need instant relief for cramps, but that's
Yeah.
it. And it's, like, one
Yeah.
day. But even then, it's like turmeric and stuff usually does the trick.
Yeah. Have you tried, why am I blanking out on this? Cramp bark?
What's it called?
Cramp bark is the common name, and I'm sure everybody that's listening is just like shouting out the name right now. It's such a common herb. It's going to come to me at some point. Really, really good for cramping. You may be able to get off the ibuprofen. I'll
Okay.
send you a link to it. Viburnum. Yeah,
Okay.
viburnum.
Send that
Viburnum.
to me, please.
Yeah, viburnum's a real common plant. It probably actually grows in your region. It only grows where I live in the mountains of North Carolina. It's a little more cold weather plant than everywhere else in the south, but it's in the same family as our native like haws, black haw, red haw, berry
Okay.
producing. But viburnum's the strongest. It's also called cornelian cherry. Powerful antispasmodic, and it's called cramp bark because that's what it's mostly used for.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
yeah, skullcap can work for some people, but actually, when I'm out like teaching or doing plant walks or something, I always keep a little tincture of viburnum in case there's a young lady out that needs it. And it has never failed to do the trick.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't even know about I've been literally researching so long. But that's why people have to get together because stuff like this is old secrets. I mean, you said like your family's been doing this for centuries. One of your family members we were talking off the cuff was a part of the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah. So this is okay. Um, Charles Carroll, only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence. He's like literally owned Carroll in Maryland. And it's the reason Maryland was like the only place in America Catholics were allowed. And the reason is he was the richest man in America. He literally funded the Revolutionary War. And so they
Oh,
had to let him in, even though all the other signers were members of the Masonic order. They didn't have a choice. Without him, they didn't have guns for their army, right? Um, he, if I remember correctly, and I'm not a real detail oriented person, his nephew became the first Catholic bishop of the United States, and his brother was the president of Georgetown University.
Mm.
And so, like, his great nephew came to North Carolina about 1860, where it was still illegal to be Catholics, and you weren't allowed to own land or vote if you were Catholic. You had to sign the oath renouncing Catholicism. And I guess they eventually did and married, into Protestant families and ended up founding a bunch of Baptist and Presbyterian and Pentecostal churches even. But his son became fairly prominent in the Civil War. He served there and then opened a school. And so even when we couldn't, it's kind of interesting. Even though I was brought up Protestant, we were not very Protestant in our beliefs and practices. We kind of had the cultural thing going,
Mhm.
even like there's nothing about me that's charismatic. Hopefully,
Right.
I'm charismatic in the other use of the term, but I mean charismatic in speaking in tongues and all kinds of stuff like
Right.
that. But yeah, had that was the Irish ancestry. A lot of French. General Francis Marion was an ancestor. Creole, even some of my family came up from the island of Guadalupe, so we've got a little
Okay.
Creole influence, which I think really influences my cooking and my taste. But I think we got a little of folk medicine from there. It's weird. North Carolina is an odd place. I mean, even in like the 50s, you go to places in the mountains where people only spoke Gaelic. You could go to places on the coast where people only spoke French, really until
Huh.
public education forced everybody to be homogenized and everybody got television. Um,
Yeah, there's
yeah,
that.
I mean, I grew up like right beside the Lumbee tribe in North Carolina, 50,000 Native Americans. And like my great grandmother was probably Lumbee, but she would never admit to it. And the only reason, the only reason we really know this is because she used their language. She had words for like coffee that was, she'd call it Ellick. That's the Lumbee word for coffee. Or she'd say, don't mamick it up. That meant don't mess it up. But that's, you know,
No, I love
and
that.
she
I
had a lot
know
of
we're
remedies,
no, for sure. When I think that's honestly where a lot of my mom's um herbalism kind of came from was the Native American tribe. We were a part of the Eastern Delaware Nation for a while when I was a child. And I have an Indian name, Wambre Luta Chisnawian, which means little red eagle in
Wow.
whatever language that is.
Yeah.
And I don't really talk about it all that often because, Native Americans, paganism, blah, blah, blah. But there was a part of it where it's like they taught us a whole lot about how to use the earth to heal yourself. And
Mhm.
obviously, as Catholics, we believe it through, God heals us through the things he created. Not everything is a god or anything like that. But there are so many people that still latch on to the pagan side of things and like, oh, well, witches use potions and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not the intended purpose. Like, that's not the intended use of herbs. People, you look at the moon. You can say witches cast spells on a full moon, but also the moon is a representation of Our Lady in Catholicism. That doesn't make the moon evil. It just means that people can use the symbolism for evil sometimes.
Yeah,
So,
well, that's why I wrote the Christian history of herbal medicine. Is because especially where I live, like I said, it's like hippie central. We got okay. If you've ever been to Asheville, North Carolina, not right now when it's like totally underwater and flooded out, but normally about sunset, thousands of people come into downtown and have a drum circle the entire night. And that's like it is like the crazy. It's like what they call it the San Francisco of the East.
wow.
So we got a lot of witches and Wiccans and such up here, and really, not all of them are bad people. I interact with them, quite frequently, whether I know that's who they are or not. But for a lot of our, Christian community, Protestant and Catholic both, they kind of see herbal medicine as being kind of new age like. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, it's actually not. I mean, if you have the book of Sirach in your Bible, God gave a role to the physician. At that point, all medicine was herbal medicine. All
Mhm.
medicine was herbal medicine really until about the 1920s, except for what we would call toxicology now, where they were using like mercury
Right.
and different things like that. And even that was invented by a very Catholic, interesting figure, Theophrastus Bombastus Paracelsus von Hohenheim. his his father was the physician at was it Einsiedeln, something like that. It's a little parish in Germany that was actually under St. Hildegard's patronage and was helped funded by it. Einsiedeln, something like that. Anyway, his father was he used all the herbs, right? And Paracelsus was a sickly little boy, and he took him out and he showed him how to gather the herbs and how to treat the people because it was actually sort of like a place where people would come for healing, sort of like a spa
Okay.
kind of thing. And he goes on, he's a brilliant, short, pugnacious, arrogant little guy that makes enemies everywhere he goes. I mean, you could tell by that name, half of those, he called himself that. That wasn't his given name. And so he ends up incorporating German and Swiss herbs into medicine, which was not done at the time.
Oh,
Everything had to be done in Latin and it had to be using the Greek formulas, the Roman stuff from like Dioscorides. So the guilds of doctors at the time start putting a warrant out for his arrest and accusing him of alchemy and witchcraft. And he ends up like running for his life, and he'd go here and like heal a king and then have to escape. He's the one that started introducing like mercury and heavy metals in, probably as like chemotherapy type drugs.
interesting.
And interesting guy. And if you look him up, all you're going to find is like new age stuff about him because a lot of people wrote books on alchemy using his name because it was a famous name. He actually is buried in a Catholic cemetery where they have a statue to him and is
Hmm.
famous for saying that he rejected Protestantism because he would not burn with Luther.
Wow. That's so interesting. And it
Don't you love
also
that?
just goes to show how like history can be so twisted over time. And for real, the Catholic Church is the only one that holds truth, not just, in light of other religions, but also in light of history. Like we're the only ones who actually document it unbiasedly.
Yeah. And, like looking at Catholic England. I mean, there were so many wonderful medical universities there and such great botanists and all kinds of stuff like that. In the Protestant so called Reformation, they basically slaughtered all the Catholics and confiscated their land.
Right.
The easiest way for like somebody from the middle class to become like a successful doctor or something was to accuse a Catholic of witchcraft.
Oh,
That's where a lot of our thinking herbalism is mixed with witchcraft comes from. Uh, yeah, in fact, a lot of that happened. And one of the best Protestant English herbalists was Culpeper. And he was always accusing people of witchcraft. And then it came back to bite him because, sort of like Paracelsus, he translated the Latin apothecus books into English and the guilds went after him and accused him of witchcraft. And he was suddenly on the outs with everybody. But yeah,
wow.
I mean that's. But the other thing is like the brewing of beer. Women used to brew the beer, and they were called beer mistresses, and they'd wear pointy black hats. And when the beer was done in a big cauldron, they'd hang a broomstick over the door. And so that's kind of where we get the idea of what a witch looks like. And if she brewed some bad beer and it made you sick, you'd say she put a spell on you. So
Interesting.
yeah, and
Huh.
especially a lot of the herbs they use. Actually, St. Hildegard von Bingen is the one that introduced hops in beer brewing. But before then, they used things like henbane and Murica Gale and like the American equivalent to Jimson weed.
Oh, wow.
And so you could definitely see something flying around in the air and demons chasing you if you drank some of that bad beer.
Yeah, I mean, ooh, a little hallucination
Exactly.
there.
I mean, they use mandrake. Mandrake's also with the same family as belladonna and Jimson weed and all that. And they said, and, okay, according to legend, you had to find it. You couldn't look at it once you saw it. You had to like speak softly as you walked up to it, and then tie it to a dog, and then chase the dog away. So it would pull up the root. So you never saw it when it was coming out of the ground, and it would scream as it was being pulled out of the ground. So that's how hallucinogenic mandrake is.
Oh
And
my.
that's European mandrake, not American mandrake, which we actually call mayapple. Two very different plants.
Right. Now that's so funny because all I can think of is that scene in Harry Potter, which I'm not a Harry Potter fan at all, but where they're pulling the mandrakes out and the mandrakes are just screaming.
Yeah, I mean, and, there's probably total legend, but I mean, you can understand if people were putting this stuff in their beer.
Well, especially for the time too. I mean, there were so many things that weren't explained about like the properties of certain herbs and things. There weren't scientists experimenting with these different herbs to see what caused it or whatever. So it makes sense for the time that they would be like, taking these precautions and being like, all right,
Yeah.
the dog can deal with it, not me, thank you.
And of course, people could misuse such as that. I mean, you can use, certain psychoactive plants to manipulate another person, put them in a catatonic state, like the zombies in Haiti. I mean, that's an herbal potion essentially that's used to put them in that state. And
Right.
well, there are a lot of different. So, I mean, some of our lore when it comes to like witches and all that is really a lot of it's anti-Catholic mythology, actually, but some of it's actually bad people trying to manipulate people,
Yeah.
and yeah, and that's true enough. Probably every culture.
Yeah, I mean, at some if there's a means to be able to manipulate somebody, anyone will find the opportunity to use it, I mean, evil people will do evil things. You can't necessarily stop them. So,
Yeah, I mean, even in like Native American. So I told you about the Lumbee tribe. There's a certain plant, I'm not going to name it. It was actually used and made a strong decoction and put on a certain body part that when you were with the person of the opposite sex would make them like enslaved to you. And
interesting.
yeah, and that's actually what at one point was made illegal. And, anyway, very interesting stuff. So
That's so
it could be just, like Lucretia Borgia trying to poison somebody, or like probably Rasputin used various herbs to influence the Russian czars, and yeah,
yeah. No, it's crazy to me how people have always found a way to use things no matter what they are to either manipulate or use them for evil, even though the thing necessarily is not evil in itself, it's not intrinsically evil. Um, and yeah,
yeah.
no,
And
I
don't
think,
forget,
yeah,
I mean, like you could get herbal information from the Archangel Raphael, but the demons used to be angels too, and they know stuff as well. And it's really interesting. I was looking the other day. Popped up on the TV a picture of Rasputin. I thought that looks like Charles Manson. And I pulled up their pictures and put them side by side. And you look at those eyes. I got a feeling those guys had the same demon.
awkward. But it's so, it really is in the eyes though. When you look someone in the eyes, you can truly tell if they are evil or not. And the person themselves, like the human being is not evil. We were made good, but we can do evil things that make us bad, basically. And you can see the effects of sin when you look into somebody's eyes because it's just crazy deranged. You get almost uneasy around them, not because you're like, oh my gosh, an evil person, but there's something unsettling about their eyes
Yeah,
where you can truly tell they're being tormented by a demon or by their past choices. Um, and it's really startling to see in person. I've only witnessed it in my own life when I go to sidewalk counseling outside of abortion clinics, when I'm trying to not dialogue with the escorts, but they're screaming at us and we're just standing there, and that is when I've truly seen, I want to say evil, really. I mean, we see it every day on the news, but that's when I've truly witnessed it in person myself. Um, anyways, but going back. But yeah, I just think in general, people need to have more of an open mind about herbalism and holistic medicine and not view it as what people are trying to push on TikTok and stuff about it being witchcraft and these things and stuff.
sure.
Plants are created by God. They're used for good, they're used for healing.
Yeah. I mean, and some people use herbs every day and don't even know it. I mean, the aspirin you might take is a synthetic version of the same salicin we used to get from willow and masterwort. One other plant that's not coming to me right now. But yeah, willow bark. Um, if you use like silicate or senna laxative, that's senna. That's an herb that's been used for that purpose for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Actually, if you eat rhubarb pie, and I love a good rhubarb and strawberry pie, rhubarb was one of the most valuable herbs in Europe because it was imported from China to be used as a laxative. And you go, English
Wow.
food can be a little stodgy, as they say, so they needed their rhubarb.
Yeah, who was it who said, "Let medicine be your food and let food be your medicine"?
Yeah, it's Hippocrates, and uh, he is also attributed to say as saying, "Why should a man die if sage grows in his garden?" He thought sage was like a panacea, and um, really good to have on hand. It's not just good for curing sausage. In fact, a lot of the herbs in our spice cabinets and such originated as medicinal herbs. You know, if you
Hmm,
wanted to cure meat and keep it around, you could put on there some garlic, you could put on oregano, you could put on sage, all of which have antimicrobial, antibiotic, antiseptic properties. Black pepper is a someone helps keep flies away. So, yeah, and so all of our wonderful salamis and such come from that. But so many of the herbs we cook with, but you should always have, like for instance, sage around because it can help curb excessive menstrual bleeding. It can help with sore throat, um,
hmm.
and I mean, just about everything in the spice and herb cabinet is also a medicinal herb, and that's where I often like to get people to start learning about herbal medicine is what they already have on hand, what they use, and the next step I always say now walk outside and look at the trees because almost every single tree has medicinal qualities. A tree can absolutely save your life. It can stop bleeding. It can, and like people think, oh, a sore throat, that's no big deal, right? But if the tissue gets boggy and it won't contract, you can choke to death.
Right.
So yeah, but one of the other stupid things I did have done before, I was my mom's dryer tore up, so I went and got her another dryer. Didn't have anybody help me, so I just had to put it on the back of the truck. And when I got my pickup truck, when I got back to the house, I got a dolly and I got it down. I got it on the dolly, start pushing it in. I'm going upstairs, and it shifted. And the dolly kicked back on me and fractured my shin and split my leg open. And so, being a guy, I just like wrapped some duct tape and a paper towel around it and put the dryer in, installed it, and everything. And then I'm like, well, now I got to deal with this. I'm away from home. What can I do? All right, I got to stop this bleeding because it's in a low part of my body. It just won't stop bleeding, right? So cayenne pepper would have been actually my go-to as a first aid. Cayenne will stop bleeding. You just sprinkle it in there. It's wonderful. Didn't have any, but I was down in Pinehurst, North Carolina, where they got a bunch of pine trees. So I went
Oh,
outside,
wow.
got some pine pitch, and crumbled it into the wound. In 5 minutes, it stopped bleeding. Pine's a disinfectant. That's why they use it in pine sol, so it helped disinfect the wound. Wrapped it up, applied it a few more times, put some comfrey on there. In about a week to two, the wound had gone away, and I don't even have a scar.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it truly is a testament also to how you're still alive after all of those accidents and
I've fallen off ladders. I've fallen off of mountains before.
I think this is where the statistic comes from that women live longer than men.
I think so. Yeah, I think
Wow. No, I think it's phenomenal to hear about, the ways that herbs can really help us and to reassure people that herbalism is Catholic. Yes, of course, witches will do whatever the hell they want, but at the end of the day, like, all of this does come down from saints, and people who truly use what God gave us to heal ourselves, because He gave us everything we need. And obviously, there is a time and a place for, like, modern medicine when it comes to surgeries and things like that if it's, like, life-threatening, but at the end of the day, so many of us go into the doctor's appointment for things that really aren't that bad, but we're always scared into it. And I think that also circles back to like our culture and how we're afraid of death, even though we're a culture of death,
yeah,
which is a thing for another time. But I don't know. It's really interesting to hear about how you've used medicine and, relating it to how I've used these medicinal herbs back in my life and hopefully inspiring others to also use these herbs and maybe just try something out, something small when they have a cold or something, to just get introduced to it. But yeah, thank you so much, Judson, for coming on and talking about this. Where can my listeners find you?
all right. Look for me at judsoncarroll.com. Look for my books on Amazon. Got about 14, 15 will be out this next week. It's I do also do daily Catholic gospel reflections. So this is a book for like next January through June, a daily reflection, like a devotional for the mass readings. Um, I've got about this will be my third one of those. Um, I do my Southern Appalachian Herbs podcast. It's all available wherever you get podcasts. I've got my Uncensored Catholic podcast where I talk about Catholic topics and rant about politics sometimes. And you can find me. My blog is southern appalachian herbs.blogspot.com. And I'm on just about all social media that hasn't kicked me off for comparing Dr. Fauci to yogurt on Spaceballs. I did that. People got really mad. It's like merchandising, merchandising. That's where the real money is.
I mean, they're very similar. I don't know who would disagree
Oh
with
yeah.
that. Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, so definitely go check him out, guys, if you guys are interested more in this type of topic. And because I get so many emails about it, I'm gonna assume you guys are. But thank you again, Judson, for coming on here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Anytime. And I'm going to have you on my show pretty soon as well.
Yes.
As we can
Yes, we definitely
chat
have to
more
work
then.
that out. 100%. And with all of that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode and you learned something, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.